Hello and welcome. I'm painting palm trees by the ocean in loose watercolour today. The weather's cooling down where I am and I'm trapped indoors, so I wanted to escape to a little bit of sunshine. Something like this. Wouldn't this be a fantastic place to escape to? I can't go there right now, but I can escape with my paintbrush. I've loosely sketched out the main elements in the composition and now I'm going about splashing in the colour. I have to say that the last few paintings that I've done, I've been feeling like my work has been tightening up a little bit, and what I really like is a loose, expressive, painterly painting. That's what I like to look at, and it's really the way I like to paint. But I always think that painting is a bit of a window to whatever's going on with you, and I think that if I see some sort of tension in the painting, it's probably reflective of whatever's going on, and right now that seems understandable. And painting seems a great way to not only notice what's going on, but also to find some time to calm down and relax. I firmly believe that if we can loosen up and let go a bit in painting, it becomes easier to do the same thing in day-to-day life. And in order to loosen up a little bit in painting, for me that means more water, more paint and less thinking. So when I put down the colours, which are those lovely warm colours in the foreground, and it's something I've been really enjoying about painting these ocean scenes, is you automatically have this warm and cool colour contrast happening in the landscape. And when I put in those two, the sort of golden colour and the more red burnt sienna colour, there was a lot of water in first, and then I splashed in rich juicy paint. And there is something so calming about watching those colours flood across the page and fall where they may. There are some lovely rich darks on the horizon, and I switched to my flat brush to make life a little bit easier for myself, popping in those watery marks. And the colours in the ocean get lighter and lighter as the water gets shallower. So I'm using the same blue that I'd put in the sky for the part of the ocean that's closest to the little pathway there. I decided to stick with that flat brush to paint the trunks of those palm trees, but before I do, I like to dab in a bit of clean water here and there because I love that unpredictability. The element of uncertainty is what makes it so exciting to paint like this. You don't really know what's going to happen. You've got sort of a plan, but it becomes an exercise in trust, knowing that whatever happens, you will be able to make the best of it, and it's going to make a fun, exciting representation of this scene. And you don't need to know exactly how it's going to turn out for it to be a painting that you're happy with. That's the kind of life view that I am delighted to subscribe to. I'm also thinking here about the light forms. I'm making sure that on the left-hand side of my tree trunks I'm using the lighter colours, and I've repeated the colour I used in the path, which is that kind of yellow ochre colour, to put in the marks on the left-hand side of the tree trunks, and I'm using a dark brown on the right-hand side. And one of my favourite purples to add a bit of purpley grey shadow, extra depth to the base of those trunks, and also the places where they're crossing each other and making additional shadows against one another. And I've been dying to paint the palm fronds. At the moment I seem to be putting palm trees in just about everything. I guess if you're going to paint ocean paintings, that's kind of par for the course. But I rather enjoy putting on those palm fronds on the graceful arches of the ribs of each frond. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm using multiple greens and yellows to reflect what I can see in nature there, that as those palm fronds age, there are so many interesting different colours that we can see in the one plant. And again, I'm making sure that I simplify what's going on in that vegetation. I don't need to paint every part of it, and I'm using my same approach of letting the water and the paint figure out how most of that is going to look. The darks are really important because they are what draw your eye. So you want an interesting variety of dark marks to make your painting be something that the viewer wants to stick around and look at. I've changed to one of my other favourite brushes, which is one of those Chinese brushes that makes very interesting kind of calligraphic marks all over the vegetation, which I do love. And I started this painting on an A4 piece of paper, but I wanted to make things a little bit easier for myself by making a slightly smaller painting, and I think that also helps because the way I paint with a lot of water and splashing about, if you paint right to the edge of the sheet, which I often do, you do have this extra complication of the paper starting to slightly curl and lift. The thicker the paper, the less that is a problem, but if you paint right to the edges, that will happen. Of course, you can get over it with taping down the watercolour paper, but to be honest, I don't have time for that. I just want to get on with the fun part of the painting. And I always use a 300 GSM paper, which I find is a really good weight to minimise the amount of buckling that occurs, even with the amount of water that I like to splash on there. Paper that's less than 300 GSM will buckle unless you tape it down or use one of those gummed blocks, you know, the kind where the binding is on all four sides instead of it being just on one like you get in a pad. And anything more than 300 GSM, I find the expense is not really worth it. I've moved back to painting palm fronds and using that same approach of varying the brush strokes and the different colours that I'm using to do that. And I had started with the sky, so the sky is completely dry, which is making me able to paint on the top of it. But I'm rather wishing that it wasn't in places, so I have again been splashing in little bits of water here and there because this is one of the areas where I was feeling that my palm trees were getting a bit of a tense, uptight feel rather than the loose, relaxed, flowy beach holiday feel that I was going for. So you've got to be a little bit careful when you're putting extra water on top of your dry paint because you can end up creating those cauliflower washes. But if it's just a tiny bit of water, it's enough to make the paint move about and do the unpredictable things that I love so much without disturbing those the sky that's been painted underneath. And I did notice the at the top of the palm trees, as those palm fronds die, they collect at the top and you've got those lovely textured, dry, brownish leaves. And I've rather enjoyed suggesting those with my Chinese brush marks. And again, I'm using the colours from the road, that yellow ochre, and the same brown that I used in the tree trunk, as well as the purpley colour that I was using as my shadow colour. Because really what you're painting is the sort of shadow marks that those dead fronds create on top of each other. And of course, I'm not trying to paint them perfectly from my reference, I'm just taking the general idea of them and putting those shapes in. The other thing that was quite an important and easy to overlook element in this image was the lovely shadow of foliage, which obviously isn't in the picture frame, but it really grounds the front of that image and adds another extra dark that we can see in the foreground, and that leads us into the picture. I'm using the same purple for that shadow as I used to put in extra shadows that are created by the palm trees against the grass and the foliage. And these are the fun, important parts of the painting. It's a great chance to make sure that you've got in enough dark areas, because watercolour always dries lighter, and make sure that you're happy with the final image. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button if you feel slightly more relaxed. See you next time.